Hey, No Stroke listeners. David and I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to listen to this episode. If you find our podcast valuable, we ask that you consider supporting us with a small monthly donation. You could head over to nostrokepod.com to become a supporter of the show and help David and I continue to create content for listeners in our stroke community around the globe. Now let's get to today's episode.
This is the No Stroke Podcast with your co-hosts David Dancero and Michael Garrow, helping you to support and thrive in life after stroke. Their podcast is designed for educational and community support purposes only and should not replace medical treatment and guidance of your own health professional team.
Welcome to episode 68 of the No Stroke Podcast. My name's Dave Dancero. I'm here with Mike Garrow, my co-host. We started our day together and we're ending our day. Sunrise to sunset, Mike. Welcome back.
Welcome, David. It's always good to see your face, And we were saying on the meeting, in our last meeting that we just had there, with a future guest that'll be coming up.
Yep.
That we need to see each other in the flesh more. I know we talked about it last year. We got to make this happen. We live too close now not to. It's not a good enough reason. Right down 95. Not too
right. You
far.
did close the gap by about a good hour or more, right?
Yeah.
So the summer is coming. I have a couple of venues that I'm going to propose that we'll talk about in future episodes. But yeah, this is the summer of the Seaside podcast reunion, maybe. I don't know what you would live event. We only had one starting way back when. Where you
what's the beer down, the Narragansett Lager in hand?
There's Narragansett. There's quite a few nice little breweries that are popping up in and around Gansett. So
all right.
So
let's do it.
let's lock in a date. So let's jump into that there wasn't a lot in the stroke news, right? But things kind of wrapped up at ISC earlier in February. We are officially turning the calendar to March 1st here. We had a great interview this morning that we're going to be introducing our guest shortly on this episode. But I did want to ask you a question because I've been since we moved back to Buzzsprout for our hosting provider. I've been very much trying to keep up with they have their own podcast called Buzzcast. And they asked on the podcast in their last episode, how would you measure success for your podcast in 2024? I can tell you how I answered, but I was wondering what are your thoughts? How would you answer that question?
I think we just talked about it on the Narragansett shore, sipping a beer.
Oh, that's what it's all about. Okay.
A live pod. Yeah. I mean, that doesn't sound bad. No. Success for me this year, I think, would be hitting another milestone of 75 episodes.
Okay.
I'm a big milestone guy, but I think what that's showing is our consistency, right? And our ability to continue to have these conversations and put the time in, regardless of, the support, right? The financial support that we've been, we think, I think we should give a shout out, should we not, to the supporters who've come on so far?
Yeah. Why not?
I think we should. To Rory, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. And we'll be speaking with Rory in an upcoming episode to share his story. And Wilson.
Yeah, and Wilson. Absolutely. And
so,
the list hopefully will keep growing. And, in addition to us getting together later in this year, the way I answered that was I thought that a measure of success would be if someone reaches back maybe it's a stroke support group, and maybe someone at a hospital system relays our information, and just lets us know that, hey, we use some of your material for our group, and
Yeah.
in the years that we've been doing this, those have been really the things that, we've connected some of our tech providers with stroke survivors that have heard about the technology on the show. That, to me, that would be a big measure of success. If and I did also comment that, and along the way, it would be it would also be helpful. Maybe we got a couple dozen more Rorys and Wilsons along the mix. But to me, it's, the reason why we're doing this is to connect the dots, and we are continuing our conversation today around, the power of community exercise, wellness, and education, and having that support, and knowing where those services are. And it's amazing, how many people now that we've been doing this years, we talk to groups, and someone knows someone who knows someone who's heard about what we're doing, and it's just, I think we, maybe when
Yeah.
we get to 75, we celebrate some of those stories, and reflect
I
back.
think so. Yeah, and that's kind of what I said. I think in the like end of year recap, and or even when we hit the 50th episode, I think it's like, those success stories of, it's hard to get those though, right? And I think
Yep.
that's what I'd really encourage, and I think, why we have our the podcast website up there. Like, please share your feedback. Like, we want to hear from you. It helps us um put together content, but just keep this going. Like, I think, similar to your point, right? If we could hear of another success story similar, to countless others that we've gotten over the course of our 60 now 8 episodes.
Yep.
But yeah, I would 100% agree with you, right? Whether that is someone who's stumbled upon the podcast and dove in deeper and now understands the risk factors towards stroke, or, in what we're going to be talking about today, really kind of giving someone the encouragement to take that step into exercise, right? And
Yep.
and kind of breaking down the stigma that goes against community-based fitness and exercise post-stroke. um yeah, we, being able to hear about that, of course, is a
Yeah.
key to making like helping us continue to do this.
And I think that's, Mike, why when I participate in some of the podcasts that I do listen to, and they have a text support line where you can just reach out with your comments. I think of, us too, like we feed off of
Hmm.
and grow with those comments. So it's, no pod, big or small. We all like to get that feedback, and that's those boosts or so, they do count. So I encourage anyone. We have the No Stroke Pod website set up specifically to be able to collect your feedback and participate. And now we do have the support button that allows you to become a subscriber to the show, and buy us a cup of coffee. So keep those going. They really do help.
Yeah, yeah. I like that question, David. Thanks.
Sure.
It's always good to reflect back on the goals, right?
Yeah.
We're nearly a quarter in. But yeah, look, I think we've been on this theme here of exercise. Last episode we sat down with Rachel and really looked at the barriers, even from like the increased need and requirements over in the UK to drive more exercise for the chronic stroke population. Really, just that gap in, how do we find these facilities that people could go to? Like, where do they do these programs or these exercise programs? And today we're fortunate to be bringing on Lauren Esposito, who is the operations manager and a physical therapist in the Ohio Health um, Hospital Network. Um, she'll bring us through really like what they've been able to do at a community level to have that seamless transition from hospital to home, and then to this facility where it's really catered and designed with patients and caregivers in mind of catering to a neuro population, right? And just some of the programming that's offered, the aspect of how they're kind of bringing the community engagement together, and just making it a safe and a fun place for people to go and participate in exercise, which we know is so important, and many of our listeners know is so important. But unfortunately, the system is still not set up to show the importance of exercise post-stroke. But I think they're doing some really important work, because all their data is integrated, right? Like being a part of this hospital system, like often the gap is once you've left the hospital, there goes the records, right? So like now they're able to actually track and have outcome measures of these patients who are still within the exercise programs. It's really impactful, and excited to kind of see what the future is for these guys.
Yeah, and our guest uses the term that close the loop, and I think that's such an important. She's also a physio, and that's such an important thing that we talked on the previous episode too with Rachel about how it is the therapist, the rehab team's job to take their patient through that next step and make sure that they're supported, because we know now all the benefits of therapeutic exercise at the get-go, right? To reclaim mobility, get someone independent, and then we send them off. Once we correct for physical deficits and get someone mobile and more independent, we don't facilitate physical fitness and consider it as how that can have a potential and positive impact on all the other health challenges survivors face. Those things include fatigue, balance and falls, cognitive impairments, chronic pain, sensory abnormalities, emotional health, depression, that social isolation, and others. Those are the things that are under the tip of the iceberg that survivors face. And therapeutic best practice is to continue to address exercise as the best medicine to help in a holistic model. Having this interview only makes me more interested in we say it that it'd be a great opportunity to use this as a model, what they're doing. It's a fantastic facility, and I think we need more of these throughout the U.S. for sure.
Kudos goes to obviously OhioHealth for seeing the importance here and just the team behind really bringing this to life. I would encourage people. We'll drop a link to it, but there's I believe it's like a virtual tour you could kind of go through on this. So yeah, we'll once this episode's over, certainly go check it out. It's a gorgeous facility. Wish we lived closer to it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful design from the outdoor spaces too that included. So I'm excited to share this episode.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it. If you do like this episode and the podcast, please, like, subscribe, become a supporter of the show. It would certainly help us. But with that, let's get into it with Lauren Esposito. Hi, Lauren, and welcome to the No Stroke Podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. It's excited to have yet another physical therapist on the podcast. I know David always gets giddy when we get a physical therapist.
You start nerding out.
We'll get too technical into the science on this one. We're really looking forward to discussing, and it's been a recurring theme that we've focused on over the past few episodes around fitness, and especially community-based fitness, right? And just the importance of exercise post-stroke, but the often disconnect between providers being able to actually give this level of therapy with our beautiful healthcare system that we have that often axes it at a certain amount, but then survivors being able to find a place that they're comfortable in. And I think what you guys are doing through OhioHealth and this beautifully designed and well put together Neuroscience Wellness Center is something hopefully others could learn from. So we're looking forward to diving into that shortly. But before we do, why don't you, for the audience, kind of give a brief background of yourself and kind of what's gotten you into the field of physical therapy, what kind of keeps you motivated today?
Yeah. So I stumbled into physical therapy really by happenstance. I took a gap year between high school and college. I was working on my own personal health and well-being, lost 80 pounds. Then I started getting into activity and exercise, started running marathons. Lo and behold, hurt my hip running a marathon or training for a marathon, but I was like, I'm going to run this race. So I went to physical therapy. I was like, what is this magic? No pills, no anything. Like, I used exercise to get my body ready to run the race that I wanted. So that's how I found physical therapy. I really didn't know a whole lot about it beforehand. And then during my clinicals, had the opportunity to do an outpatient neuro rotation. And I really just fell in love with, again, the thought of using exercise as medicine to help people achieve their goals, teach people how to walk again. I mean, all of those things are so powerful. So yeah, I really stumbled into it, and it's been a great fit for me.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Enjoying this episode, Mike and I would like to remind you we now have a show supporter option on our website. Follow the heart button to help support us and continue to make great content possible. We'll give you a shout out on the show too when you do. We appreciate your generosity. Well, Lauren, welcome to the show, and so it's no problem doing an early start on the podcast then, because you're a marathoner, so you must be used to the early morning training. That's one thing we've learned right away about you. What else before we dive into the work that you're doing with Ohio Health? What makes you happy? What do you do outside of your 9 to 5?
I have a huge family, so I am the youngest of 5. I have 9 nieces and nephews under the age of 15. So anytime I get to spend with my family is amazing. And then I recently got the travel bug. I did my first solo trip to Spain last April. So I'm going back to Europe this coming April. So just really seeing the world, experiencing things. It's super important, I think, to just find the little joys in life. I love cooking. So that's another thing. I mean, when you run a lot, you got to eat a lot.
You
So,
gotta eat.
and I'm not gonna eat bad food, so I'm gonna cook it, and it's gonna taste good.
I'm not sure if you could make out in David's background there. He's a Boston Marathon
I see
alum.
that.
That was a big part of David's recovery post-stroke, kind of set his goal and
Yeah. Well,
did
now
the
I'm slow and
26
steady, so there's no Boston Marathon in my future. But
Lauren, that's okay. I
I can
tell
ship it
everyone.
off.
Yep. I grew up as a hockey player, so we were efficient left to right, not forward. So running became my zen for my stroke recovery, but I am not fast by any means. The only way I qualify is through charities. I do not qualify for the Boston Marathon.
I love it.
maybe one day. So I came across this Neuroscience Wellness Center that you guys have through Ohio Health, actually through an architect design award magazine.
Yeah.
Somehow it's kind of how I stumbled across this, and I saw it in a Neuroscience Wellness Center. I was like, wow, well, we have a facility here in Connecticut, hospital for special care. I mean, it's tucked in the back, hard to get to. It doesn't really fit the needs of a neuro population. And when I looked at this, right, there were so many things that just stuck out. Obviously, one, just how gorgeous it was designed, but really the focus on designing that center to be like ADA efficient. There was just so many things as I looked and kind of kept reading this that just fit, right? And that I would love to, and really thankful for you to be on to kind of discuss some of this, but bring us back to kind of your role within Ohio Health and some of the origin behind this center starting, right? So just bring us through kind of how this came to be, and really the mission of the center within the hospital system itself.
Yeah. So I've been very fortunate in my career. I was able to start early on with Ohio Health, about a year after completing my doctorate. And Ohio Health was building the Neuroscience Tower, which is a hospital, but it also has specialty practices. And their concept was they really wanted multidisciplinary clinics for our neurospecialty populations. And they wanted physical therapists, occupational therapists, and speech therapists involved in the clinic, sitting alongside the physicians, nurse practitioners, physician's assistants, you name it. So I was very fortunate that I got in at the ground when that building was opening. So fast forward a couple months, the medical team that I was working with was really now working alongside therapists, was really understanding this kind of the importance of accessible spaces and programs and you name it, right? So they started, I would say they were championing, our ideas of we have to have these programs and we need to, have it in the community. So it's definitely, it takes a village, I feel like, to get this done. So we already had a Parkinson's exercise program. We had a stroke exercise program. The stroke one was a little bit smaller and was designed more like small group personal training versus like a group fitness class. And we didn't have one for multiple sclerosis. So then I started that program. So now we've got, 3 big programs. They're growing. People are getting referred to them. Our patients are coming. They're having great outcomes. And then it's like, okay, we need a space. We've outgrown, which is amazing, right? We've outgrown the spaces that we're using. We're borrowing space in our other fitness center. So Ohio Health has kind of 2 fitness centers on the same campus, the Neuroscience Wellness Center and then the McConnell Heart Health Center. So we were borrowing space, but it wasn't necessarily the ideal time for our participants. So it was like, we now need a home. And really then we have amazing community partners in the Columbus area. So Ohio Health was like, we're going to commit 50% of the funds and then we're going to fundraise the rest. So our community really jumped in. We had a lot of amazing donors to build this center. And, the rest is history, but I had the opportunity to really be at the table when they were talking about what's the design of the building. And before it even broke ground, what are we going to do? What do we want here at the center? And our biggest, when you talk about kind of the vision for the center, was just a space that felt like home, right? Like it's, just like when I walk into a gym, I'm like, oh yeah, here's what I'm going to do. Like when you come into the gym, whether you roll into the gym, you walk into the gym, whatever it is, like this is where you should be. This is where you're accepted. This is where you're going to exercise. This is where, you should feel very comfortable. And then the people should feel like family or really good friends at least. So that was
Yeah,
really the vision, was just community.
congratulations. It really is a beautiful facility, and you do a great job. I'm going to encourage everyone listening to go and take the virtual tour,
Yeah.
because, from the design at the beginning, it just how were patients and families involved in the design. It's beautiful with the open, the natural light, everything we know now about the importance in bringing those outside gardens, and it's really it's so well done. Can you talk just a bit about like how, I know it took a village to do this literally, but how were patients and care providers involved at the beginning?
So it wouldn't have gone to the level of like the actual design, but we had a lot of focus groups of like, what do you want in the center? What is meaningful to you? What would make you join? Like understanding programs that they wanted, what the space would mean to them, what they would do at the center, like as detailed of like, would you shower at the facility, right?
Great question. Yeah.
Really wanting to understand, because there was discussion about, do we think people are gonna, want like a full blown, you know, like locker room you might see at maybe your, typical gym. So we went down to the nitty gritty. What time are you going to come in? What do you want to do? And then we use that information to inform our programming and our design.
Yeah, that's such an important aspect in to that level of detail, right? Because like I know getting getting my mom into the gym was a big ask, right? And she has, foot drop, difficulty walking. And it's even like, how are the floors, right? Like certain, if it's like a sticky floor, like when you're at the mall, that's where she has the biggest problem, right? So it's like those considerations are just so important, especially for this population. You spoke to the other fitness center you had, which might have been like probably a lot of cardiac rehab, right? From what
A
I
lot of cardiac
what I
rehab,
would assume.
community
Yeah,
fitness center. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so when you look at this center, can you walk us through? Because I think what's really important and where the biggest gap that we see, right, between the handoff of being discharged and like community fitness, right? Like what's that relationship like from, your colleagues over at the stroke center, like within the Ohio health system, as well as other providers, really to provide like that transitional care, right? How does that work with you guys?
So we learned a couple lessons, right? So I mentioned I started one of the programs and I really never had a problem getting people in or convincing people to join the program. And hindsight, they knew me. I was sitting down face to face in the office with them, being like, come take my program. Like they felt comfortable with me. They knew who they were going to see, all that stuff. So we opened the doors. We had a lot of our kind of founding members, as we call them. So they were taking our programs, join. And then we kind of hit this rut of like, why aren't people coming in the door? And so we opened up in the middle of COVID. So we had a lot of other restrictions, but we kind of walked it back and we were thinking, why did we not have this problem prior to this? And so then we started what we call rehab to wellness. We were doing this with some of our partners in the community, like a local YMCA that might be up in like the Delaware area or things of that nature. But we weren't doing it at the Neuroscience Wellness Center. And so we started it. So rehab to wellness is essentially if you're working in therapy, let's say the tail end of your plan of care, we're getting ready to discharge with a community wellness plan. But maybe we're just not sure if there's a couple barriers that we forgot to address or how that person's going to do coming into the facility. Maybe they're nervous, right? Your whole life has changed. You're moving different. Exercise precautions and contraindications are different. So the therapist can now bring their patient to the center for anywhere from like 1 to 3 visits to do their sessions at the center. So they can get them on our equipment. They can make sure, are you really able to get out of your car and walk the distance into the building and scan your scan card, make sure we've tackled all of that entry barrier, or they can even join them for one of our classes. Like, how are they going to do in a group of 15 people? How are they going to do, getting their weights and bringing it to their chair? And then sometimes we found out like, oh, maybe we need to extend the plan of care and do a couple extra things. But then we have to close the loop, right? So that's the push out. So the vision of the center was closing the loop. So now you're here at the center. We don't do any therapy at the center. So it's all retail, it's all exercise, wellness. But we do have access to your therapists, your physicians, your nurse practitioners. So if we notice something like, Mr. Smith had, 3 falls in the past, 3 months, something's going on. We have a conversation. Would you mind if we want you to go back and see your provider? Do you mind if I reach out to them and let them know what's going on so we can close the loop and give people prepared of, hey, this is what's happening. We're concerned. Maybe they need to go back to therapy. Maybe X, Y, and Z is happening. So it's really about every point of contact, them feeling safe and supported, and that we can give guidance.
Yeah, I love that term you just used, closing the loop, because in PT, we were forced to get this some vital, important information about outcome measures and everything, but we don't know once they leave the clinic walls. We don't, and we just had this conversation with another physio from the UK, Rachel Young, on our last episode. Like, whose responsibility is that to help that handoff and close that loop? In my opinion, and I voiced this, it's what happens after is most important. And it is the physio, it is the care team, the rehab teams that should be doing what you're doing on a routine basis. But often we don't know, maybe there aren't community resources available, but we don't know what happens most of the time upon discharge. It's really, again, that drop off. So really
So how,
important. Go ahead, Mike.
just quickly on that, like, like how are you like communicating then with their care team? Are you guys like, do you have Epic, like a EHR system set up within
Yes.
the rehab center? Okay.
So we can, get into the medical record and send like secure notes to their providers. And we also have referrals. So the provider can send a referral directly to the center. That's the other thing is you go, let's say um, you had your stroke a month ago and you go to your first, physician visit and you have a stack of papers, this big, right? Here's all the things that we want you to do. That's a lot. That's overwhelming. You're asking me to follow up with 100 different people. You're giving me all these resources. So this is an opportunity for us to also, again, we're not hard sales people or anything of that nature. Hey, your physician recommended that you come in and check out the Neuroscience Wellness Center, giving you a call to follow up with you. Would love to schedule you for a tour. Not, hey, you should call them. No, we'll call you. And if you're not ready, that's fine. But we just want to take one thing off your plate. So we try and make it as simple as possible. So it's the communication back and forth, and the medical record has been great for us. And being part of a health system is, obviously the way you're going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's often, right, like the biggest barrier, right? It's like, where is the data go? Yeah, that's cool. And certainly the benefit of being in the system, right? Like this all wrapping together. So why don't if you could kind of spend some time maybe discussing a few programs that are unique to this center, and specifically maybe, a stroke population itself. That'd be interesting to just hear again, and how you kind of work with that, the multidisciplinary care team as well, just coming together as one.
So our specific stroke programming, we have a stroke and brain injury wellness program, but we have a basic and an advanced. So it's an 8-week program. It meets 3 times a week. It has a designated start and stop date. We do outcome measures before and after the program. And it's really catered to working on, the pillars, right? So balance, strength, and cardiovascular endurance. It's progressive over the 8 weeks. And then there's multiple sets of hands in the room. So depending on the ratio, you could have 2 to 3 teachers so that we can modify as best as we can in a group setting for individuals' unique needs. So that's our pillar program for our stroke and brain injury population. But then some really fun kind of specialty classes that are really open to anybody, no matter what their neurologic condition is, and can be modifiable. My favorite it's called Upbeat. It's our cardio drumming class. So there's a big stability ball. You've got drumsticks. So we have a couple like adaptive grip things if you can't hold, the drumstick, or you can do it single arm. Whatever your mobility level is. And it's choreographed, right? So you are beating along. It's a routine. So a lot of cognitive processing, timing, sequencing, and it's just fun. That's my favorite class that we offer. And then a program that has been very well received by our stroke population is our NeuroSplash program. So we don't have a pool. But I mentioned there's 2 fitness centers on our campus. So the other fitness center has a warm water pool and then a big lap pool. So 2 days a week, we have a NeuroSplash class where we can take anyone who registers for the program into the pool. Has a, accessible lift, all that stuff. And we run like a water aerobics, water strength class. The way people's faces light up the first time they get in the pool for class is just amazing. I mean, I think we all know, like, you feel great when you're in the water. But it's always, I have no fear of falling. I'm doing, like people will literally just like jump in and you're like, oh gosh. But that's a really special class.
I love those 2 examples you just gave. The drumming too, that bringing in the music and the rhythm, really, really creative. How do you pull in the whole social part of it? Do you bring in the caregivers, family members? How are they part of this experience?
Yeah, that's my favorite topic. So if I rewind the clock and I think about when I was still teaching programs, the one thing I hated more than anything was I'd have my participant in the room. And then if there's someone who needs assistance with transportation, their loved one is sitting in their car or sitting in the lobby or something, right? And that's an hour or an hour and a half of the care partner's day. And you're like, everybody needs exercise, right? It's good for your mental health, your well-being, you name it. So care partners can join as members to the center. They can do absolutely everything that their loved one can do. They can take an exercise class alongside of them. They can exercise independently, you name it. So they can have the same exact membership and take any of the programs. The one thing we didn't really anticipate, but we've changed kind of how we run it, is our diagnosis specific programming we previously didn't have open to care partners. And the reason being was we were like, well, it's not, it's diagnosis specific. It's probably, depending on the care partner, it's probably not something that they need to be doing. But then we had, just a member say, I just really want to see exactly what they're doing in the class. And then I want to help with the carryover. And I was like, oh, why didn't I think about that? Right. So then we were like, yes, you can take anything, you can sign up for anything. However, you need to support your loved one wants to be supported. However, you want to be involved, great, do it. We fully support it. So we've learned also from our members of, I've never had a stroke. I don't have a neurologic condition. I've worked with a lot of people that do. So we have this is what we think. But then when our members tell us, no, this is actually what we want, we really have to listen to that because it's their lives that are impacted.
And you mentioned the membership aspect of this, and it's interesting because it sounds like you guys have established a membership-based model in a neuro population, which oftentimes people hesitate to broach, right? Because there's always that kind of financial burden after a stroke or dealing with a neurological condition. But I think over time, the value of exercise, right, often weighs that is probably the most important thing you can invest in, right? So speak to kind of how you guys thought through this membership model, and maybe for, the folks who might be struggling, do you guys offer any financial support or anything like that? How does it look to run this program, right? Because we know, as much as we'd like to do things for free, that's not the way it works, right?
Yeah, we definitely can't do everything for free. Our membership, I feel like, is very, very reasonable in terms of pricing. And really almost everything is included in your membership cost. But no matter what your financial means are, we want exercise to be accessible to everybody. So again, mentioned, it takes a village, and the amount of support that I've had from OhioHealth and our providers. So OhioHealth runs a We Give campaign, and the majority of our scholarship funds have actually come from associates who donated to this fund. So we have a pot of money that we call our accessibility fund. And based on, your finances, you can qualify for a 40, 60, or 80% scholarship. So if you qualify for an 80% scholarship, you're probably, rough math, going to pay $11 to $12 a month after taxes. So pretty affordable. And then we do a renewal every quarter. Now, the one thing with that, yes, we have money. It's not unlimited. So what we say is you have to average coming twice a week, so 24 times a quarter, in order to have your scholarship renewed. Now, I always hear what about my transportation? What about this? It is not meant to be punitive. The whole goal is we want you to exercise a minimum of 2 times a week. So we have a lot of options. So we have recorded content, we have virtual classes. So really at the end of the day, we want you to be moving and exercising and engaging with us. Life happens, right? You get sick, something happens, just let us know, right? If you've only come in twice in a 3-month period, now is probably not the right time. Doesn't mean you can't apply for a scholarship in the future, but let's use that scholarship money to support someone who right now it is the right time. So people can come on and off scholarship. it's again not meant to be punitive. It's just trying to be good stewards of money that people have donated to us to help this cause.
I love that model because you're making sure that they have sweat in the game. Let's put it that way, right? That they're actually going. And we had the group on from Stroke Alliance many episodes back, and they do these stroke camps. And they said when they offered the program completely free, they got people to sign up but didn't show up. So this is I think a real creative way to help foster engagement and kind of make sure that folks are getting the best benefit out of the great
Absolutely.
service you offer there.
Cool. So I just want to go back, Lauren, to you mentioned the for folks who might not be able to make it in, right, virtual options. And I'm sure virtual classes were a big part of what you guys offered through COVID after, the pandemic, like restrictions started to ease, and sounds like you still offer a bit, but you really stress the importance of people coming in, right?
Yeah.
Can you just talk to like how you guys thought through that virtual versus in-person model? Because it's obviously easy for people to sit at their house, right, and do these virtually. But I'd be curious just how you're encouraging, and like it seems like you've been successful, right, getting people in rather than just opting for virtual classes.
Yeah. So we obviously had all of our, precautions, protocols in place when we opened up, but virtual is a great option. We like to promote it more as like a flexibility option, right? Like life happens, but there's just no comparison to in-person, like human connection. So what we did with our virtual, so we do have people, they don't have access to transportation, or they don't live close enough where, driving an hour is feasible for them. So what we've done with our virtual option is we try and make it very interactive. And we do a mixture of recorded content, live virtual only, and hybrid. So what that means is with our hybrid classes, like you're on camera, you can talk to us, we can talk to you. And before the class starts, our instructors are, saying hello, we're asking how you are, we're turning the computer around, say hi to the people who are here in the studio. So we're trying to give a little bit of a human connection of, hey, David's here joining from his living room today. How are you doing? So glad that you're here. And they feel seen and heard. Right. And not even just they feel it, they are seen and heard.
Yeah.
So we're trying to do a little bit of everything, but the in-person is just so important.
Yeah. But it's a challenge, right? Like to get people, I feel like once people have gotten comfortable with virtual, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like remote work, right? Trying to get people back into an office. But there is that benefit, and especially for an exercise program. And just the power of what you've built with the community, right?
Yeah.
Just think that's super important. So, we'll wrap up here shortly, but just wanted to kind of touch on, do you have an example of, we'd love to hear success stories, right? Like, has there been, a memorable patient experience that you could talk us through, and what that has kind of looked like both for you as, the operations manager, kind of bringing this center to life and the opportunity to provide the care, and then just for the patient, like what was that experience like, that stuck out to you?
Yeah, there's so many memorable experiences. I think, the first one that will always stick in my head is the day we opened up the center, because we're talking about a group of people who have been committed to our programs for many years prior to having this accessible space. So they're navigating, less than ideal parking lots, less than ideal like fitness center setups for them, not for, in general, just it was difficult to get there. So they have put in all of this work and all of this commitment. And then we opened up and they were like, you built this for me. Right. Like that's just it was very powerful to me. I did put a lot of, blood, sweat, and tears and time into this, and seeing the impact that it had was very memorable. So that's kind of the first one that sticks out in my mind. Individual success stories is, I can think of a member who started with we talked about the basic stroke and brain injury wellness program. He needed to have a personal assistant with him because he was, super unsteady on his feet, and we didn't have enough, hands to make sure he was safe at all times. He was walking with a walker. And he continued to show up. He continued to take the program. And now, almost 3 years later, he's moved on to our advanced program, which is much higher intensity. He's walking with a single point cane. He doesn't have a care partner with him. Like, he continued to show up, and he's continued to see progress. So just that commitment. And then this one, it's not, there's a little bit of there's definitely a sad element to it. But I think the message is also very important. We had one member and his wife his wife was also a member, and he unfortunately has passed away. But I went to the member's funeral, and she said to me, they were unfortunately not members for a very long time when he passed away. They've been members for about like 6 or 7 months. And she said to me, the amount of joy that we experienced in the past 6 or 7 months coming to the center made all the difference in the world. So he'd had a stroke for many, many years, and then they had the opportunity, and I might get choked up, to experience something that felt inclusive and safe and was fun, and they enjoyed it together. The story is very sad, obviously, that we lost him, but the fact that they just had that memory of happiness close to the end of his life meant, I think it's impactful.
Yeah. Lauren, you're making me a little choked up because I'm reflecting
I know.
on
I'm trying not to cry.
similar stories. That's, that's as physios, that's I think why we get into this, and it's the quality of life in between. And sometimes we are working with folks that we know might not be with us for a long time. So thank you for sharing that. And we have to bring things to a close here. We could go on and talk to you more about all the great work you're doing. And we always end with the magic wand question. And in many ways, what you're doing there, I think you're actually answering the magic wand for some folks that have left us with this pressing need. Like, the question goes, if we were to give you a magic wand, how would you redesign the stroke care pathway? But in what you're doing, many folks have said there's nothing out there for us after when we get discharged. You guys are filling that void. So how do you improve on that? And maybe I just want to make sure we let you know that we hope others follow your model there, and maybe that's part of the answer. But is there anything that still bothers you the most about, especially if you can apply it to stroke, then what we could maybe be doing better?
Yeah. It could go one of two ways when I think about it. So, but either way, it's the same answer. Why does it have to be so hard? Right? My father had a stroke a couple months ago. He's doing fabulous. But just the coordination of care, even in an amazing healthcare system, the amount that the individual has to do outside is just so hard. It's hard to get your visits approved. It's hard to set up transportation. It's hard to find somewhere to go. I think it's a bigger, to me, than just a pathway in the healthcare system, because it's just a lot of burden. It's a lot of time, and it's, I'm still working, and I'm trying to set up, appointments, and who do I call? It's just, it's just hard. And I know that's maybe an easy answer, but it touches so much. It's hard to get the therapy that you need. It's hard to see the specialists that you want to see and you need to see. It's hard to pay for it. It's hard to get accessible transportation. It's hard to start a program like this if you don't have, a big healthcare system to back you up. But we know that the outcomes make a difference in your health. So in the long run, it's the long-term investment. It's so beneficial. So why is it so hard? I don't know how
well
else to
said.
say.
And right. And it's like, you're in it every day.
right?
Yeah.
You've been a therapist and it's still hard, right?
Yeah.
So just like, for everyone else out there who doesn't understand the system, might not have these connections to other therapists and understand the health, even, the hospital system, like, yeah, I think you're spot on. And as David alluded to, right, you are filling such an important void, but there are gaps, like even with that, right? Like
Yeah.
there's so many blockers and just challenges within this. So look, I think that, really helps, us in it really in our mission, right? Just to
Yeah.
continuing to talk and have these conversations with folks that are, across the system in different areas, whether caregivers, survivors, therapists like yourself, and, people on care teams, because, you know, there's certain aspects that each one of these parts of the system, experiences in a different light, but also could bring value to. And I think, as we continue to have these conversations, it just becomes more evident that, as much as there's a bright light that you've brought today, and there's so much great work happening, you bring light to the challenges that you still face, in your recent experience. And I'm happy to hear your father's doing well.
Yes.
But yeah, it's a tough world in stroke. It's a tough world, but really appreciate you coming on here today, Lauren, and sharing, the work that your team, and really give kudos to your employer, Ohio Health, for really investing and seeing the importance of this. And I hope it's a message, as David alluded to others, right? That, to your point, there's outcomes being made here.
Yeah.
And it's super important.
It's
So thank
important
you.
for us to all to continue to connect the dots so this isn't so hard. That's,
Yeah.
bottom line. And thank you so much, Lauren. It's been a pleasure to meet you. We'll put all your contact information in the show notes, and we encourage everyone to check out Ohio Health and the great work you're doing.
Thank you so much. And if I could say, if there's anyone out there who's been maybe inspired to try an exercise program, I've never had someone tell me, man, I wish I didn't start doing this.
Perfect.
It's a great
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the No Stroke Podcast. Be sure to tune in each week for more knowledge on stroke recovery in the brain, with tips, technology, and interesting stroke thriver interviews where they share their success to enable you on your own healing journey. Make sure to hit the follow button on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to our show. Mike and I will love to ask you to rate and review our show to enable us to grow our audience. Please check the show notes to follow us on social so you can connect and reach out to find more about advertising with us or becoming a guest on our show. Until next time, stay well, keep the faith, and keep moving forward.